Welcome, and thank you for coming to my talk about Garfiel. To be honest, this PowerPoint was difficult to create, not because I was recapping information, but because I was missing a side story about an occurrence involving Garfiel. I expected it to be a brief read of 10 to 20 pages, but it ended up being 140 pages. Please appreciate it. Garfiel is one of the key characters, and I believe he has a fascinating past. Also, despite the author's claim that his father is nothing exceptional, I'm quite interested in learning who he is and how he will appear in the main story. But the identity of his father isn't the only intriguing aspect. Although I constantly claim that I am not a fan of ReZero's shonen side, let us say that I am a fan of Garfiel's shonen side, because in essence, he is just a youngster who wants to establish a name for himself via his strength, and it only works for him. After all, it would be weird to see Reinhard and Julius pursue that goal. But I believe it is time to begin this video, in which I will explain you his story prior to his initial appearance in the anime, as well as his aim and accomplishments in the ReZero universe. After splitting from Garfiel's father, his mother, Reala, arrived at the sanctuary with her small daughter, Frederica. In that location, she would give birth to a demi-human boy who would someday develop into the young man we know. Eventually, his mother would leave, claiming she was going to bring his father so they could have a happy life together. However, I doubt this because based on what we know about her past, she does not appear to have had positive connections with her ex-partners. This is because she was allegedly a victim of sexual violence. Eventually, she would leave the sanctuary and become a victim of a rock avalanche. Garfiel would eventually learn about this, but while knowing the truth, he opted to lie to himself, creating a skewed account of the events of that day. He kept repeating it to himself until he believed it was true. This was obviously an immature decision, but keep in mind that Garfiel was only 4 years old at the time. I don't think it's fair to expect him to respond with complete maturity. There is little known about Garfiel's childhood, but he was the lone youngster in the sanctuary, surrounded by only elderly people and marginalized demi-humans, a product of Lugnika's prejudice. This would eventually influence his personality, since being in a place surrounded by frail and weak elderly people, he imposed on himself the responsibility of caring for and protecting the sanctuary. It's no surprise that he finally referred to himself as the shield of the sanctuary. In fact, this is how he introduces himself to Subaru on their first meeting. He was known to spend a lot of time playing children's games with his sister, but their recreational activities were unusual. For example, Frederica would seize Garfiel's arms and toss him into the air with all her strength. And while Frederica is lovely, she is also extremely strong. Thus, it was normal for her to send Garfiel soaring into the air. Garfiel, however, was also a demi-human. Thus, these behaviors did not upset him. In fact, he relished this small act. Something significant to note is that they used to play with a type of bracelet throughout their activities, which Garfiel would eventually employ in his fight against Elsa. But the days of calm and play with his sister would come to an end when she grew up. Determined to pave the way for the sanctuary's inmates, he planned to leave and prepare the way for when they would ultimately journey into the outside world. Frederica always believed she was doing the right thing and that her brother would comprehend the circumstance. However, things did not work out that way. For Garfiel, seeing his mother die after leaving the sanctuary was extremely traumatic, and in his perspective, everything from the outside world was bad and a threat to the things he wished to safeguard. This view was strengthened when his sister exited the sanctuary. While Frederica strongly thought she was doing this for the betterment of the people and her younger brother's future, Garfiel assumed Frederica had grown tired of the place and abandoned him. He became so upset with her that he never wrote her a letter or received the ones she lovingly sent him. Despite this, Frederica continued to send him books that he could read. Speaking of books, it is known that Garfiel came across an unusual one during his boyhood. This book is intriguing because it is reported to include a workout program by none other than Reed Astrea. If you are not familiar with Reed Astrea, he is an important figure in the world of ReZero. He was the first sword saint and the direct ancestor of Reinhard. Although it is not official, he is thought to be the second or third strongest character in the entire series. In fact, the author claims Reed is more adept with the blade than Reinhard himself. This person would be the source of Garfiel's book and alleged personal training routine. Because he wanted to protect the sanctuary, he began to perform the precise workouts. It is worth noting that it is unknown whether the procedures in the book are genuine or a fabrication by the individual who released it. At some point throughout his childhood, he would encounter the Oni sisters, Rem and Ram, who had previously been duped by Rosewall and were working for him. While they did not develop an unbreakable connection like Crush and Felix, they did have some mutual appreciation. Rem and Garfiel didn't get along well, despite the fact that they both pretended to to want to defend the only thing they had left in their world, Ram. One might assume that their mutual admiration for the pink-haired girl would bring them together, but it instead created them adversaries. Rem frequently monopolized Ram in order to irritate Garfiel. Rem is also reported to have discarded the letters Garfiel gave to her sister, and it wasn't until she fell in love with Subaru that she realized how much Garfiel loved Ram. She wanted to apologize to him as soon as she saw him, but gluttony attacked her before she could do so. Ram's connection with Garfiel is both complicated and not. It isn't complicated because Garfiel has no chance with Ram. Garfiel is like to a small puppy chasing a car. The dog will never catch it, and even if it does, it cannot drive it. What I do believe is complicated are his emotions. You see, Garfiel is confident, but it is a false confidence. He pretends to be confident in himself because if he does not, the world will devour him. His enormous power allows him to maintain this facade. Ram, on the other hand, is unique. She doesn't pretend to be confident. She just is. Unlike Garfiel, who derives confidence from his strength, but his strength has done little to assist him achieve his goals. This is why I feel Garfiel is in love with her. She's everything he aspires to be, but is unable to achieve owing to his trauma. Something to remember from these days is that Garfiel first changed into a tiger when he saw Roswal give Ram mana. The incident appears to have made him upset, and I say seems because I don't recall all of the circumstances. Come on guys, I've read approximately 300 ReZero novels, and I have the right to have hazy memories of certain passages. Another interesting element suggested in the anime specials but proven in a side story is that a flower near the sanctuary is said to bloom under certain conditions. Garfiel persuaded Rem to accompany him to that location in order to show Ram something unexpected and mature. The scene was gorgeous, but it wasn't enough to make Ram fall for him. After that, the years passed without much excitement until, on one of the days when Subaru arrived at the estate, it is revealed that Garfiel had sent a letter to Roswal, which is why he would temporarily go. Then Garfiel would make his debut in the second season, and well, I think you already know what happened to him. I would usually finish this section here, but I feel compelled to continue because there were events that occurred between the second and third seasons that the anime did not and will never address. As you are well aware, there are numerous short stories set during this transitional year between seasons. I would estimate that there are approximately 30 to 40 stories. While not all of them feature Garfiel, I will highlight those in which he played a key part, while ignoring those in which he had a minor role. 4 stories suit this description. One is a trilogy of stories about the fools Subaru, Otto, and Garfiel. This group had several adventures between the second and third seasons, which helped them get along better. Remember that at the end of the Sanctuary arc, Subaru got along well with Otto and Garfiel, but the Merchant and the Shield of the Sanctuary did not. So, throughout this trilogy, we observe how these friends' bond develops. The first novel chronicles the story of Otto's visit to his hometown, which he took with Subaru and Garfiel. During the journey, Subaru is kidnapped by an evil spirit, leaving Otto and Garfiel to grudgingly join to save the protagonist. Despite not getting along, they recognize one other's character and strengths. Garfiel recognizes Otto's ingenuity, and Otto knows that Garfiel is not only a strong boy, but also a compassionate one who needs to be guided by the proper people. This incident would improve their relationship slightly, but not to the extent shown in the third season. In fact, as you may have noticed, Garfiel addresses Otto with a unique prefix that, when translated into our language, would be something like Brother Otto. While their friendship improved after the evil spirit snatched Subaru, Garfiel still did not refer to him as such. This is where the second novel comes in, which I must admit I have not read. Not because I don't want to, but because it is only available in Japanese. According to my understanding, this is the scenario in which certain circumstances progressively strengthen Otto's faith in Garfiel to the point that the latter begins to refer to him as an older brother. Fortunately, the third and last narrative in this trilogy involves the 3 fools being compelled to cross-dress in order to attend a high society function. Natsumi, Audrey, and Garnet are temporarily born here, and they are later charged with theft and attempted murder. Subaru could already imitate a woman's voice, Otto could barely do so, and Garfiel couldn't, but he got away with it by claiming he had a cold. I really like this third story, and after discovering it translated last weekend, I was inspired to create this PowerPoint. The fourth and most intriguing narrative about Garfiel takes place in the novel Golden Siblings, when a villain kidnaps Frederica, and it is up to Garfiel and Clint to bring her back. This chapter digs further into the siblings' connection and concludes with an intriguing revelation that will undoubtedly have implications in the main novel. I wish I could go into further depth about what happened here, but I'm unable to do so right now. I was about to conclude this section, but I just discovered another side story in which Garfiel appears to grab the focus again, but it has not been translated, so we are all out of luck. Why are the most intriguing stories not translated while Rem's side stories are? Anyway, let us go to the following section. I honestly believe Garfiel is an overpowered character, and you'll soon understand why. Garfiel has spent his whole life in the sanctuary, but his training was not typical. It was incredibly harsh. As you may be aware, Garfiel possesses divine protection, namely divine protection of earth spirits, which allows him to recover his wounds and energy just by keeping his feet on the ground. To give you an idea of how severe his training was, he once said he would do squats until he was fatigued. He reportedly went for a week without tiring. Furthermore, he would have persisted if they hadn't intervened. Because of his excellent body, he was able to survive Reed Estrella's training routine. This arduous training paid off, as by the age of 14, he had attained the level of strong warriors such as Elsa and Kurgan. It is also known that he is extremely skilled in healing magic, outperforming both Rem and Beatrice in this regard. So, picture how damaged he is when he mixes divine protection and healing magic. You could say he has limitless stamina. We might also add his beast metamorphosis, although while that form gives him an overall bump in physical stats, Garfiel avoids fully morphing at the moment due to the events of the novel. That's because he can't fully control his beast side, at least not for long. He does, however, use it to endure strong strikes or in exact moments of adrenaline to increase his damage output. But now, let's go on to another section. In Lugunica, I believe he ranks just below Marcus. I'm not sure if he's stronger than Julius, and the knight has stated that he doesn't know if he can defeat Garfiel. But come on guys, Julius is really modest and has years of actual battle experience. While Julius lacks Garfiel's durability, I believe Julius would win a short and strategic combat, but Garfiel would triumph in the long run. As I often say, everything depends on the type of combat. Garfiel's powerful punches are useless if he doesn't land them. This is exactly what happened in his battle with an adversary from another country. Despite lacking Garfiel's damaging abilities, that opponent was able to stop and even mock him. Garfiel is strong, but he still lacks experience. In conclusion, within Lugunica, he would rank below Reinhard and Marcus, but on par with Julius. Outside the kingdom, he has the potential to advance to a high-ranking military position, but he will almost certainly be outmaneuvered by veteran combatants. Garfiel has had enormous success in his quest to become the strongest, but he has been a complete failure in matters concerning his family, aside from Frederica, of course. In fighting, he has built a name for himself in Lugunica as a result of his performance in Pristella, and he has also gained the respect of several Wallachian clans. But I'm sure my furry kid wants to succeed in other areas, such as telling his mother the truth or gaining Ram's heart. But that's life. Sometimes you just don't succeed at what you want most. Let us now go to the final section of the video. Garfiel's future looks extremely exciting. Once again, if spoilers worry you, please leave. Otherwise, you are welcome to stay. Garfiel would be absent after the 3rd season because Subaru needed to go somewhere else and couldn't take him with him. However, fortunately, there are some stories about him in the side novels. For example, after the 3rd season, there is a story that tells what happened in Priestella in the days following Subaru's departure, when he tasked Garfiel with the city's defense in case the archbishops returned. During this period, it is revealed that Garfiel intended to tell his sister and Ryuzu the whole truth about his mother, while also spending his days visiting and harassing Otto, who was still injured after the struggle with gluttony. There is also an account of Otto and some companions traveling to Typhon's grave to gather and transfer the witch's remains in case the witch cult ever returned. Typhon's tomb was particularly intriguing since they discovered living creatures that had survived for more than 400 years, as well as some unusual chimera. Garfiel was also able to recognize Japanese words painted on the walls, which he learned after seeing Subaru write them in his personal journal at night. We didn't hear anything else about him until the end of Arc 7, when it was revealed that he was part of the expedition dispatched to collect Natsuki Subaru, who had been mistakenly teleported to a neighboring country. Throughout the journey, he interacted with people who had previously met Subaru and spoke highly of him. This only made Garfiel more pleased, since he adores hearing others recognize his leader. Unfortunately, he would face some really difficult challenges throughout this arc. His first serious combat came against Kafma, a divine general candidate from the Wallachia Empire who, like Garfiel, was regarded as a monster in his tribe. However, Kafma eventually confessed that, regardless of how much of a monster he was, Garfiel was just a monster among monsters, and he didn't mean it as an insult. He was truly impressed by the young man's persistence and strength. During this encounter, Garfiel is claimed to have swallowed explosive stones to get rid of fatal insects that had been inserted into his body in order to prevent defeat. It is also said that he repeatedly sets himself on fire to counter particular adversary techniques, surviving all of this because to his inhuman regeneration. Unfortunately, his next bout was with Olbart. While he was not defeated, the contrast in war experience between the elderly man and Garfiel was obvious. Olbart humiliated him with only one hand, not letting him to land a single hit. If Roswal had not arrived in time, the young fighter would have suffered greatly. After this, he finally reunited with Subaru after a long time apart, and they shared a heartfelt moment, as you can see in the image. Later on, Subaru selected him to participate in the final battle against the witch, where Garfiel would finally fulfill his dream of defeating a dragon. However, it must be acknowledged that he only managed to win because he was affected by Subaru's sin of greed, which significantly enhanced his physical abilities. Also, probably because of his age and infantile thinking, he developed a friendly bond with Reinhard's father, Heinkel. I wouldn't say they became great friends, but there was mutual respect between them, enough to save each other's lives during the battle's conclusion. Garfiel felt extremely anxious when Heinkel vanished at the start of Arc 9. Unfortunately, he was eventually vanquished by Aldebaran in their combat, but as we all know, Aldebaran was only able to do so because of his ability to rise from the dead. Garfiel is currently unconscious. He was on the point of death after being attacked by the dragon, but Petra's medical treatment saved his life, and he is now recovering from his injuries. As of the day I am publishing this video, he is still unconscious and being transported by Petra in Petrasha's chariot, presumably to Amelia's camp. But that's it for today. But tell me, what are your thoughts on Garfiel's life?